So it is Tuesday now, which is both the first day of our boat dives and hopefully the end of the jellyfish alert so we can start night diving. Well, this area is primarily known for shore diving. We decided to mix in some boat dives to just kind of try and get as much of the experience as possible, anticipating that we're going to come back in the future and we'll have a better handle on, is it worth doing this, is it worth doing that? And there is Blondie with her Blondie shirt. Blondie being born in 1990, huge fan of Blondie the band. So we are meeting the boat in about an hour down there. The dive sites they go to are mostly on Klein Bonair, which is that little island right on the horizon there. It's basically ringed with dive sites, kind of similar to this island. In addition to the iguanas, our room has a bit of native Bonaire wildlife. So as it turns out, through either Jen's request or accident, we were placed on separate boats. So we are currently trying to both end up on the same boat, and we shall see if that works or not.
I can't dive without my buddy.
Jen and I have been on a fair number of these little day dive boats, and there's always a certain amount of chaos getting everybody on board with their gear. When we booked this trip, we kind of assumed that the dive boats were all going to go to Klein Bonair since that was boat only. However, it turns out they do it kind of by acclimation once you get on the boat, and we ended up at Small Wall, which was basically just a little down the coast from some of the dives we've done. The other assumption we'd made is because the shore diving is all on your own without a guide present, we kind of assumed the boats would work that way, where they just brief you on the site and then turn you loose. Unfortunately, that was not the case. Instead, there were 2 dive guides and 10 plus people, including one maybe 8-year-old girl. Everybody got in the water and moved along as one herd with one guide in the front and one in the back. Now, we have done plenty of dives like this before. It's not our favorite, but it is what it is, and it's all you can get in some areas. Here it was just kind of a surprise and a disappointment because we'd had so much kind of freedom on all the dives so far. I did like both of the dive guides. There was nothing they could have done better. It was just the circumstances they were working under. Don't get me wrong, it was still diving, it was still enjoyable. It just felt like a downgrade after all the shore dives. For the second dive, we advocated a little stronger, and we ended up doing the second dive on Lenora's Reef over on Klein Bonair. We did see some cool things during this dive. It's hard not to when, diving in Bonaire, but it just wasn't any different than the shore dives on the mainland. The biggest stir in our 50-some minute dive was actually when we caught sight of this turtle in the shallows up above us. So we just got back from our first morning boat dive, and we are actually going to see if we can refund the others. We still want to do the East Side Dive or Turtle City, but it wasn't quite as enjoyable for us. There was a lot of people, and it was like a cattle boat. We also had kind of an issue that last dive. I went in and we were with a group, so you kind of have to keep going. My regulator wasn't free-flowing, but it was kind of burbling, like little bubbles coming out. And because we were in the middle of a group and kind of having to dodge everybody moving around, I couldn't fix it till the very end, where I could get enough space, take my BC off completely, turn my air off down at like 30 feet for a second, open it back up, and then it stopped. Jen was looking at me like, what the heck were you doing? That is one of the challenges underwater. There's something simple. Invariably, there's something simple you want to tell your partner. If it's something important, we have symbols for that and hand gestures, but trying to gesture her to like turn my tank off, but don't leave it off, turn it right back on, yeah, that was a little too complicated. Sadly, no refund for the boat dive, but we told them we are canceling tomorrow morning, so we technically have one for Friday as well. But we are going to go north and see about doing some more fun shore diving. Drive-through tank fill is awesome, and I want that at home where I can just drive through and grab tanks wherever. So the funny thing is this part of this road is actually classified as 2-way, and they warn you if you go a little further, then it's 1-way and you have to go all the way to Rincon. Now the difference between the 2-lane road and the 1-lane road is just the 2-way has these little pullouts that most of the time work for you. So we're currently at Oil Slick. We're going to do this because the one that is one of those do not miss dives is further down the road, and once we go that far we have to go all the way to Rincon. So this is our first set of tanks, and then we're going to do the not to miss dive, which is called
Karpata.
Yeah, I want to call it Copyrigh because where I've been recently. While the name Oil Slick doesn't exactly evoke great visuals, there's nothing there. It was just a proposed site for some sort of a petroleum plant. Its claim to fame is actually the ladder you can see. Instead of having to step down through some sand or coral or anything, you can just leap off the rocks or go down the ladder. We both went down the ladder. After we surfaced, both of us commented on just how much of a relief it was to be back out there on our own. You just see a lot more critters when you're not in the middle of a giant herd. You remember how I was saying that parrotfish like to bite the rocks and you can sometimes hear it underwater? These little Toby fish are another one of Jen's favorite. I think it's pretty much anything with like the cute little face. Baby fish are usually pretty much everywhere on a reef. Here you can see them hiding out in the holes in the rock. And then something happened which to Jen was one of the greatest things ever. This little jack swam up and started using me for cover. It took me a while to even notice him. The reason I did was because when I was kicking, I ended up knocking him with my knee because he was so close. He was with me for a good chunk of the dive. He would just cruise along right underneath me, and every now and then he would see something, dive down, eat whatever it was, and then come back up and be right back in his spot. Jen thought that this was the cutest thing ever, and I could hear her giggling through her regulator. This site also had a lot more of these coral nurseries. They basically grow little pieces of coral on them, and when they're established, they'll move them back onto the reef. I find stuff like this really cool, and I've been hoping I could find a circumstance where I could volunteer and actually help out with this somewhere. Just like back home.
So the highlight of that dive was Matt's fish friend. This fish was following you, and it would dive down and get food, and then it would come right back up and hide under Matt's tummy. And it was just super adorable.
And I would feel it like knocking my leg periodically when it did that, and I'd look over and she'd be going, I'd make a joke about my naked dive and how I was noodling for it, but that would be in bad taste, and I don't do things like that. It was only a short drive further north along Queens Highway to get to Karpata. It is on the one-way section of road, though, so once you're there, you're committed to going all the way out to Rincon. Every time we went, it was always less busy than Thousand Steps, and it had significantly less steps. The rocks were a little bit tricky to get in, though. This is another site that seems to always appear on those top dive sites in Bonaire. Don't miss this site. For the record, if you ask us, most of the dive sites are actually pretty similar. I mean, there's a reef that rings the entire island, so you get some slight differences, but we didn't find, oh, it was worth it diving here, but oh, I wouldn't do that site next to it. This did seem like it had the most dramatic wall with like a drop off of any of the dive sites we did. Though we'd also learned at this point that we basically wanted to stay above 60 feet because the shallower you were, the more things you were going to see. Occasionally, when you're spending 4 or 5 hours a day, every day underwater, things can get a little bit samey, but the cool thing about the ocean is you never know what you're going to come across. This time around, the big event was after I had taken us to the shallows because we were on the dregs of our tank, and we found this little squid saluting the sun. After we accidentally spooked him, he actually swam around and then came back to that exact same spot. As I mentioned, thanks to the one-way road that is kind of a roundabout drive to go through Rincon to get back to Buddy Dive, but we got used to doing this quite a bit. So it is 7 o'clock and we are going to go and try a night dive at Buddy Reef. Jen is super excited, even though we've already done 4 dives and we are both a little bit tired. So up until now, we haven't done any night dives because there has been a jellyfish alert. Apparently, after the full moon, these jellyfish come up from the deep, and they're notorious for being an issue off here. Sting won't kill you, but highly painful, that sort of thing. Apparently, that is now over. Some people don't care for night diving since it can be a little disorienting and stressful, and fair enough, dropping down in complete inky blackness with nothing but the beam of your flashlight to have any indication what way's up and what way's down is a bit of an acquired taste. Fortunately, Jen and I both really enjoy it and will take pretty much any opportunity to go. And Buddy Dive makes it particularly easy. In addition to the fact you just have to haul your gear out to the dock, they have an underwater hand line that runs basically from the stairs out to the reef, making it really hard to get lost. The cool thing about night diving is the species you're used to seeing during the day are pretty much all hiding, and different species are out. One of the highlights of night dives out here we'd been told to expect was tarpon. They're these big fish, like 4 to 8 feet, that cruise around, and they're particularly active at night. They love following divers because with our lights, it lets them see fish that are, hiding around the rocks or out in the sand. At first, we just had 1 or 2 with us, but after a while, we ended up with this pack of 7 or 8 cruising all around us and attacking any fish that dared to wander out into the sand. Okay, so after talking about night diving for so long and worrying about the jellyfish, you got to night dive, so.
So cool.
At one point, we were like, oh, look at the little fish, it's so boom. And you just hear like an impact, like poof, no more fishy. She was happiest about a sea cucumber of all things, and she didn't. And she didn't even check its butthole for a crab. It's a thing.
They have those here.
These cucumbers don't put little crabs up their buttholes. I see.